Welcome to Fireside Giants, a featured podcast by Empire Sports Media. I'm your host, Alexander Wilson, and my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. Give us a follow on Twitter if you haven't already. Alex Wilson ESM, Anthony_Rivardo. We have a lot of good stuff coming out. Today is our mailbag episode for you guys. The second one we're going to do consecutively. We're going to do these every week, hopefully Thursdays, if not Fridays, before the games. Answer some questions, get ready for the following week. Obviously, we have the Washington football team facing off against the Giants in Week 6. So a lot to talk about there, and we are really just going to answer the questions from the fans today. And then we'll have a pregame show on Sunday before the game, just to kind of run down what we expect, what we need to see. And Anthony and I have been pretty spot on with everything so far. What they've tried to do correctly, we've seen some pretty good responses from that, and like they've actually showed progress when they've hit on the points that we've talked about. So not to toot our own horns, but we've done a pretty good job of analyzing and taking a look at this team objectively and seeing what needs to improve. But Anthony, my friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'd say we've gotten a lot of predictions correct, except our score predictions. Usually, we're usually a little biased in that.
You have to be.
Yeah. Well, you have to have a little bit of positive hope before you watch a Giants game. Otherwise, it's just going to be one depressing Sunday.
I can't go into it thinking we're going to lose. It
Right.
hurts my soul too much to actually stoop that low, where I'm like, you know what, I'm just losing. I'm just watching a losing team at this point. Like, I gotta hope I'm gonna walk away excited at least. I mean, the first half of last game, the first quarter really against Dallas, I was like, this is not the Giants. Like, this is not the team we have seen the first 4 weeks of the year. They came out firing. They had a pick six. They scored a touchdown, then Evan Ingram end around. We saw a team that was actually firing on all cylinders, and it was like, whoa. That's not the New York Giants. That is the Baltimore Ravens. And then they said, wait, hold up, guys. Hold up. We are the Giants, don't forget. And they ended up losing to Andy Dalton. Of course, the refs blew some calls, but you can't expect the refs to win you games in the NFL. You got to do things right. It is what it is. But, moving on to the fan mail portion of this episode, we have the first question by Philip Santana. When do you think it's time to see what Shane Lemieux and Matt Parrott can do for our offensive line? Anthony, I'm going to let you start with that.
I think, Mark Colombo made it a point to get Matt Parrott a few reps a few weeks ago, like one drive or two drives or something towards the end of the second quarter in that one game. I think it was against the Bears.
Yep.
Right. So I think we're going to start to see that more and more often with Matt Parrott and Shane Lemieux. It's kind of like a weird concept. You don't usually see that on the offensive line, just putting guys in to get reps, but I kind of like the idea of that, and I think there should be a few more times where we see Matt Parrott just play a drive, and Shane Lemieux even, maybe he should just go in for a drive. We've seen a good bit of Shane Lemieux at fullback, so that's been a little bit interesting to see him line up in the backfield. I do like the idea of having him in the backfield as a lead blocker because he's pretty athletic, and he's a great run blocker. So I think, when is it time to see what they can do for the offensive line? It's hard to tell because Kevin Zeitler, you can't really bench him. He's the best offensive lineman we have. He's been the most consistent ever since we got him. Will Hernandez, he's been pretty poor, but he's also young, and it seems the Giants look at him as a future at left guard. So I doubt that they bench him for Shane Lemieux. So it doesn't look to me like Shane Lemieux is actually going to get significant playing time anytime soon unless there's an injury. But Matt Parrott, on the other hand, 0-5 is what we are right now. The offensive line, both tackle positions have been a real struggle. Cam Fleming really hasn't played well. I do think there's a really solid chance that within the next 3 weeks we could see Matt Parrott emerge into the starting lineup.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. Shane Lemieux, they kind of benched the whole let's play him at center concept. They were kind of like, okay, let's test him out during training camp, and obviously, they decided against it. They put Nick Gates there, and they haven't moved him since, and he's been absolutely terrible in all facets, run blocking and pass blocking, and he's committed a few timely penalties, which have hurt us. But Shane Lemieux, I see him as more of a max protection, jumbo package kind of guy. He'll come in for some reps as a big body just to open up some running lanes and really max protect Daniel Jones. But other than that, I think, like you said, Matt Parrott could be the forward guy. He could be the one that receives the opportunity first. The Giants are 0-5. If they keep losing, if they lose to Washington, there's no shame in putting in Matt Parrott at right tackle and starting to really develop your youth. They have been behind the scenes, of course, with, refining his technique, getting him a little bit stronger and bigger. And here's one concept I want to run by you just to see what you think. like, I know that we drafted Andrew Thomas 4th overall, but I don't want to force him to play a position that he's not doing well at. What do you think about the concept of, let's say, they're ready to put Matt Parrott in the starting lineup, they're ready to replace him with Cam Fleming, let's say. Do you think that they actually test him at left tackle and move Thomas over to right tackle and just flip-flop them just to see how they gauge how the chemistry, the continuity works? Maybe there's more potential with Thomas at right tackle because left tackle, I mean, he's let up 28 pressures this year. He let up 9 against Dallas, 4 sacks. He's been one of the worst offensive tackles in the NFL through 5 weeks. So that's a little problematic. And obviously, Mark Colombo, has said this week that he's overshooting his targets. His feet and hands just aren't matching up with each other. His sets are completely revamped this year to fit this scheme, and it's a lot different what we're seeing from his time at Georgia to now. So my question for you is: do you think that they could move him over to right tackle if they're ready to put Matt Parrott in there and just kind of flip flop and see what works best?
I think it's something that it's an idea that they will toy around with, but I don't think it's ultimately the decision that they will make simply because of continuity. Taking Andrew Thomas, putting him in at left tackle and saying, learn this, struggle and learn, and then moving him over to the other side of the offensive line might cause a developmental stunt. Like, it might take him a few steps back to where he has to learn a new position all over again. And only 5 weeks into his career when he struggled, it's probably not a good idea to have him relearn a new position. He played right tackle in freshman year of college, so it's been a long time since he's done that. And I do think that his future on this team should be at left tackle, and I don't think it would be wise to move him midway through his rookie season because of his struggles. But at the same time, I do think that Matt Parrott, if he's impressive at left tackle, if they go that route, I do think he actually has the chance to arise to that position. I think that he could be a good left tackle. He does, but I just think that the more logical decision is to move him over to the right side of the line and keep Andrew Thomas where he is. And then you also have to factor in what Mark Colombo was saying about Andrew Thomas this week. They've diagnosed what's going wrong for Andrew Thomas. He keeps getting beat on the inside, which we all can see.
That's a cardinal sin for tackles.
It is. And I think that's what Mark Colombo said. But they know how to fix it. They're just working on doing it. He's just got to learn some things.
It's not translating.
Because of the playing style he had at Georgia, he could just push the speed rushers back. But he can't do that here because they're too fast. So now he's been overcompensating, and then he's getting beat on the inside. So his kick slides have been off. But this is all a technical thing that Mark Colombo is a great coach. He will fix this. He knows that if there's any offensive lineman on this team that he has to fix, it's the left tackle, the rookie Andrew Thomas, who's supposed to be the left tackle for the next 10 years. So I'm pretty confident that they will get it fixed by the end of the season. Let's just hope that they do, because if they don't, we will start to be concerned and we'll have to start ringing the alarm bells.
Right. I totally agree. On to the next question. Joseph Michael, how can Evan Ingram specifically, be utilized more in the Giants' offense? He seems healthy, but is not getting the ball enough. We've talked about this so many freaking times. And he even said himself, Ingram, just this past week, I've been running more curl routes this year than ever before, not working out of the seam. That is just malpractice from offensive coordinator Jason Garrett. Why? Because Evan Ingram is purely a straight line runner. He's not a good route runner. He doesn't have the best hands, but he's fast as hell and he can't block. He's essentially a one trick pony wide receiver. And it's kind of sad that the Giants haven't figured that out yet, or at least Jason Garrett hasn't. If you take Evan Ingram and put him in the slot and you run him through the seam, you run him, posts, seam routes, even outs and ins, and not just curl routes where half the wide receivers, if not all of them, are running 5-yard hooks and curls and not doing anything creative with them, which is what we saw last week against Dallas on numerous occasions. There's a bunch of film out there that I saw. With Ingram, if you push him down the field, it forces linebackers, it forces safeties to have to compensate for his speed. They have to drop back into coverage. So theoretically speaking, if you take Evan Ingram in the slot, and let's say you have Darius Slayton on the outside boundary wide receiver position, you have Ingram, you push him up the seam, and then you drag route Darius Slayton across the middle, you're going to have an open receiver there. Conceptually, you're going to have some open space. You need to get your receivers in space, and the Giants aren't finding ways to move defenders out of space and then fill those gaps. We're seeing a lot of very tight coverage, receivers alone on an island, curl routes with no crisscrossing and no pulling defenders out of areas. That's the major issue I've seen with Jason Garrett's offense. I know, Anthony, you have a lot to say about his lackluster catching abilities, but what else do you see in his game?
Yeah, I mean, I see raw physical talent, athleticism, and it's not being utilized, as we've mentioned. In this Jason Garrett offense, we thought that Evan Ingram would be the primary target, and he would be the guy, and he would get all these play designs meant for him, and he would start to break out this year. But unfortunately, in this Jason Garrett offense, Evan Ingram has been playing the Jason Witten role. But there's a big difference between a guy like Jason Witten and a guy like Evan Ingram. I'll say there's not as big of a difference between a guy in terms of playing style, not talent, between Jason Witten and Caden Smith. So if they're going to continue to play their starting tight end in this role, Caden Smith should be the starting tight end just because of the way they play. Evan Ingram is very fast, and he likes to stretch the field and get down the seam and draw linebackers onto him. Caden Smith or Jason Witten like to use good spatial awareness, find the soft spot in a zone defense or even a man coverage and just make a contested catch against tight man coverage. Those are not the things that Evan Ingram is good at. He's not good with the spatial awareness and finding the soft spot in the zones to sit down in. He's not good at catching the ball in traffic. He's good at getting on the run and using his speed to beat linebackers or safeties who are slower than him and then catching it and running with it. We saw that against Tampa Bay with a 75-yard touchdown. He ran a nice crosser from the tight end position to the left side of the field, got it, took it up the sideline and scored 75 yards just like that right after halftime. So that's what we need to see from Evan Ingram. But what we're seeing is a lot of stick routes, a lot of curls, a lot of short out routes. Nothing that you really want to see Evan Ingram running. So they are not utilizing him correctly. I don't know if they're ever going to figure out how to utilize him correctly, but if they don't figure it out, then he shouldn't have a spot on this team. If you don't know how to use the player and he's not a scheme fit, then you should try to get an asset for him and you should try to trade him, in my opinion. And that's coming from a guy who really loves Evan Ingram and what he can provide for an offense, but he's not providing it for this offense simply because they don't know how to incorporate this skill set into this offensive scheme. So I do think we need to see a larger role for Caden Smith, and if there is no solution to the Evan Ingram problem, then the only solution I can think of will be to trade him before the deadline in Week 8.
I would agree, and just to finalize this topic, Evan Ingram's run blocking has been absolutely atrocious this year. Like, borderline, the fact that they even have him on the field to be run blocking is so bad. I saw him lined up against Aldon Smith on multiple occasions last week, and he was absolutely obliterated. Like, one-on-one matchups with Aldon Smith, who was a massive pass rusher who completely just tossed him aside. Like, I don't even know how you scheme that up and use that in an actual game and expect that to work. That's completely on Jason Garrett, 100%. There's nothing Evan Ingram can do against players like that. He's not a good blocker, and then putting up against a solid pass rusher is never going to work out in your favor. And when it comes to his, like you mentioned before, Caden Smith should be getting more reps as a receiver as well, because Jason Garrett loves to use, like you said, those curls. And he doesn't have the frame to shield off defenders. That's what made Jason Witten so good. He had such a big body and frame and target that he would be able to extend his arms, and defenders wouldn't be able to get around him to actually get to the ball. Evan Ingram doesn't have good hands, first of all, and second of all, he doesn't have a big frame, so defenders are easily able to drape over him and dislodge passes and disrupt the pass. But when it comes to Caden Smith, he has a bigger body, bigger frame, and people aren't expecting him to only run routes. Like, Evan Ingram's on the field to run routes. People know if he's on the field, he's not going to be blocking for the majority of the time. So they can easily just man him up in coverage with a good linebacker and factor him out of the game. Because then again, it boils back down to the offensive line because they're not protecting Deion Jones long enough. So Ingram isn't even able to really get into his routes entirely. And that's probably why he's running such short routes, because Jason Garrett, even if he was to run him up the seam or run him on mesh and drag and wait for him to get open on the opposite side of the field, Deion Jones is already running for his life the other way. So it's like, how much can you actually do when your offensive line is the worst in pass protection in the NFL? Last week, both tackles were so bad. It was borderline embarrassing. I think they allowed 18 pressures in total. So, what do you do there? Like I said, I wrote this in an article the other day. Daniel Jones is on pace to be sacked 52 times this season. 52 times, and let me put that into perspective. Eli Manning's worst sack season was 47, and we know how much we complained about that offensive line with Eli Manning, so that should give you an idea of how poor this unit is actually playing. Now, do you have anything else to say, or do you want to go on to the next question?
No, I completely agree. The offensive line needs to be better.
Okay, this one is more or less, why do we suck so much? As Giants fans, this is by Mills, by the way. As Giants fans, why do we still watch football? Half of my life consisted of sub 500 seasons. I wasted good money on the NFL ticket for a decade with 4 winning seasons. I already stopped going to games and refused to watch at a bar when the game isn't televised because they stink. Well, this is more of an opinion-based one. I watch this team because I love the game of football, and I'm a diehard Giants fan. I guess that kind of separates the diehards from the casual fans. They might suck, but at the same time, I am a lifelong optimist. I'll always think that this team is headed in the right direction, even when they most likely aren't for multiple years now. Um, I don't know. It really is just up to your personality. Like, there's nothing else you can say. Obviously, like, spending money on this team, I would never buy a ticket if they were 0-7. I wouldn't go to a game probably. But obviously, if they were competitive, I'd try to go to as many as I could.
Yeah, I mean, I watch the Giants because I love the Giants. I've grown up watching the Giants. It's been tradition every Sunday or Monday or Thursday, whenever they're playing. I watch the Giants. I don't miss a game. They bring me a lot of frustration, but also a lot of happiness. Just seeing them, just knowing that they even exist. I love watching the Giants. I love covering the Giants. I love all things Giants, and I love the game of football. Even further than just looking at it from the Giants fan perspective. I love watching football, and then I love having a team to root for. So, if I was one of those fans or one of those viewers of football who didn't pick a team, then I'd probably be enjoying football more because I'd be able to watch better football.
Yeah.
Because the Giants haven't been playing good football in a long time. But it's really not about that for me. I'm a diehard fan, and I always will be. I love this team, and I can't wait for them to be good again. We'll have to sit through all these crappy years for now, but once they're good again, we'll look back on them and be like, man, it was all worth it. Once we get that 5th Super Bowl, we'll say, all those crappy years, they were worth it, man. They were definitely worth sticking
Yep.
around with for this one
Agreed.
moment right here.
Yep, it is worth it because you can't expect to be the Patriots and like eternally a fantastic team. And even the Patriots are going to fall at some point. Eventually, Bill Belichick is going to retire, and that entire organization is going to be shaken up, and they won't be the same. It'll happen eventually. We're just going through a rough time. It is what it is. But on to the next question, Anthony Lafia, wide receiver or quarterback in this upcoming draft. Obviously, that's a very situational question. If you have the number 1 overall pick, you're going Trevor Lawrence, because at this point I assume that Gettleman will not be here next season, simply because if you have the number 1 overall pick, that means you were the worst team in the NFL. That means we were worse than the Jets, who just traded Le'Veon Bell, who was their best player on offense. If we have that pick, man, and I can't imagine that we will, it's gonna be a disaster to for the coaching and the management, because you don't never want to be in that position. But it's also going to be the dawn of a new age with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you go with Trevor Lawrence. If you have the 3rd pick, let's say, Justin Fields is on the board or Trey Lance, I'm going with a wide receiver, most likely. I mean, in this specific scenario, most times I'd probably go with Micah Parsons or Penei Sewell. But since he's asking specifically QB or wide receiver, I'm going Jamar Chase because, I mean, that kid is just polarizing. He'll make your offense 10 times better instantaneously. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Well, I do think that the wide receiver position should be prioritized next offseason. We need someone opposite of Darius Slayton, and we need someone reliable, more reliable at least than Sterling Shepard. He's been missing a lot of games, and he's been very inconsistent when he's on the field, I feel like. So if we have the number 1 overall pick, I've said this before, no matter who is picking number 1, unless you are the Chiefs somehow or the Ravens somehow, which I don't even think is possible for either of them because they've already got like 4 or 5 wins apiece. But unless you're one of those teams, some would even say the Texans. And honestly, if I were the Texans, I would even consider taking Trevor Lawrence. Unless you're the Chiefs or the Ravens, you have the number 1 pick. Something is wrong with your entire team and with your quarterback position in order to end up with the number 1 pick. And Trevor Lawrence is your saving grace. He is your savior there. You take Trevor Lawrence if you have the number 1 pick. I'm one of the biggest Daniel Jones believers out there. I love the guy. I text my uncle every week, and he always says, Daniel Jones is garbage. And I'm like, no, he's not. And let me explain why. And I always go on these tangents. I don't think he really cares, but I think he's just trying to mess with me. But I love Daniel Jones, and I see a lot of potential in him. But you end up with the number 1 overall pick. There's no doubt about it, you take Trevor Lawrence. There's only been X amount of generational quarterbacks. We say this all the time. Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, John Elway. Trevor Lawrence. Just that is some Hall of Fame company, or at least Hall of Fame potential with Andrew Luck company that he is being brought up with consistently.
Mm-hmm.
You don't pass on that for Daniel Jones, who is, because think of it this way, Daniel Jones, a lot of us looked at him as the second Eli Manning. Eli Manning, amazing, right? We all love Eli, my favorite athlete ever. He won 2 Super Bowls, but for a lot of the seasons of his career, he was average. He just had like 2, 3, maybe 5 at the most seasons where he was really good, 2 in particular where he was excellent. That is different than having a guy like Peyton Manning, who from season 2 to season second to last,
Was elite.
his last season, he was elite every single year. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play. You don't pass up on that type of elite talent for somebody whose ceiling is kind of just above average, So
Right.
you got the opportunity to take Trevor Lawrence, you do it. But I still don't think we're going to end up with the number 1 pick. I don't think we're going to have the opportunity to take Trevor Lawrence. So say we end up with the 3rd to 5th pick. I think wide receiver, there's definitely a strong possibility you consider taking Jamar Chase. If you're drafting a little later, one of those 2 Alabama wide receivers could be a solid option. But then I also think you have to consider offensive tackle again and solidify the other side of the line. You've got Andrew Thomas. What about Penny Sewell? Then you could have your 2 bookends of your offensive line. He's a generational guy. He is basically that Trevor Lawrence, but at offensive tackle.
Offensive line.
You don't pass up on him if you need another offensive tackle.
You put Thomas at right tackle.
You can honestly put them wherever, but just know that you're going to have your bookends for the next 10 years on the offensive line. And when was the last time the Giants had that? At both tackle positions. I don't even think they necessarily had that when we went on the Super Bowl runs. I feel like
by the way, let me add something.
Both of those. Go for it.
Let me add something in. Penei Sewell, if you draft him and put him at left tackle, you have Shane Lemieux at left guard right there. You replace Will Hernandez right away, in my opinion, because they have chemistry. Sewell and Shane Lemieux played on the same team. They have chemistry. I think you put him right in there. You just pull Hernandez right away. And the reason I say that is because Hernandez has been bad this year. There's no arguing against it. He's been bad. He had a better game against Dallas. His pass protection has been bad. Run blocking has been You just have to try Shane Lemieux, who's a dog in the trenches. He's a mean, gritty. He's powerful, and I think that familiarity is something that you consider. Obviously, this is like super hypothetical and like way in the future if this happens, but I think you give Shane Lemieux that chance.
I agree, but I'll also throw this out here. Like, I agree Will Hernandez has been poor, but in this scenario, you could also look at it as Kevin Zeitler is getting up there in age, and if you cut him, there's zero dead cap, and you free $12 million. So you could put Shane Lemieux in at right guard and put Penei Sewell in at right tackle. And then you can keep the continuity on the offensive line, at least a little bit, at least on the left side and then center. And then the right side, you do have the chemistry like you were talking about. So there's another scenario potentially. So wide receiver or quarterback, if you have the number 1 pick, you go quarterback. If you don't have the number 1 pick, it's wide receiver or offensive tackle. I'd probably lean towards offensive tackle as long as Penei Sewell is on the board. If not, I would consider wide receiver. Jamar Chase is definitely a solid option. And then I would also consider a pass rusher like Gregory Rousseau. It's a loaded draft class this year. There's a lot of really talented players coming out. And so we've got a lot of time really to analyze this team that we love and hate, according to L. Miller, love and hate. But we've also got a lot of time to analyze these draft prospects and see who's going to be at the top of the board. And so come next April, we'll have a much better answer. But for now, number 1 pick, you go quarterback.
Agreed. And also with COVID-19 and everything, it looks like, college football is being kind of hit hard with it right now. We can at least say that they will avoid big injuries. Some of these big name guys could, who knows if they would have been injured or something bad happens. It happens every year. One guy drops through the whole draft, the whole first round because he suffered a torn ACL or something. At the very least, we know these guys will be healthy. The top players will be healthy and ready to go. So that's the one benefit. Obviously, I'd rather have football any day of the week, so don't take that the wrong way. Anyway, on to the next question. We have 2 left. Is Julian Love the real answer at CB? And did we make a bad decision switching him to safety? I think we did because he's not fast at all and can't tackle. This is by Darius Slayton's number 1 fan, Lil Mayo Vert. Awesome name, by the way.
I like the name.
Yes, Julian Love is a very interesting player. If you don't know, Anthony and I interviewed him a while back, and he was just kind of getting used to the NFL, the transition to strong safety and free safety. He's been playing in the deep secondary for most of this season, and unfortunately, he's been pretty bad overall. His run defense grades out at 43.4 via PFF. His coverage grades 46.7. In total, he is kind of a liability, actually, back there. And it's kind of sad to say because we really like him. He's a really good player. Now, do I think it was a mistake moving him? No, because he's not fast enough to be a cornerback in the NFL. He doesn't have the fluidity in his hips. He's not doesn't have that elusiveness and speed and finesse that you'd want in a cornerback. I do like him as a free safety. I just don't think he is used to it yet. He's just made the transition. A lot of players, if you look at like Antoine Winfield or even McKinney, those guys played safety their entire college careers, and this is his first real season playing free safety. How on earth would we expect him to be an all-pro or even good or average at this point? It just doesn't make any logical sense. Doesn't have the instincts and the mental awareness just yet at that position. I like him more as a utility player personally. I love Julian Love kind of sitting back and filling spots that need filling, whether it be due to injury or lackluster play. I've always liked him in that role. I think that's what they were trying to do with him when they were, having him take reps at safety, strong safety, and free safety. That way he can fill needs based on, whatever factors might be happening. So that's kind of how I like him, but I don't necessarily think it was a bad move to move him from cornerback.
No, I don't think so either. I do disagree with a portion of this tweet. I agree he's not fast. He didn't run like an impressive 40 time, but I disagree with the notion that he can't tackle because I thought last year when he was playing strong safety and he was in the box, he was making a lot of really solid plays there in run defense. I thought that his tackling was really impressive, and it surprised me because coming out of college, I thought he would be better suited at the safety position. And he wouldn't be like a really great tackler. But then we saw him play some strong safety, filling in for the injured Deebo Peppers, and his tackling was probably his most impressive trait to me. I was very impressed by that, and I thought, it's unfortunate that now he had to move to another position. So he went from corner to strong safety to free safety. It's hard for him to find his footing, it seems like. But I do think that they should try and move him back in at strong safety and see what he can do. I know Deebo Peppers is there, but I don't know. You want to get your best guys on the field, rotate Julian Love in there at some point because he really did look solid at strong safety last year. And then in terms of cornerback, I do think he could be successful on the outside at cornerback in a different scheme, not this scheme. This scheme is very man coverage heavy, and like James Bradbury is always following one specific guy, no matter what his speed is or his height or whatever. He's going to follow him and he's going to lock him down. Julian Love does not have that capability. If this were like Seattle's defense, where you can just sit there in a zone and you just have to read and react, Julian Love, and it doesn't require a lot of speed, Julian Love, being that he has that safety background, might actually fit really well in a defensive scheme like that, a zone-heavy defensive scheme where you read and react. But in a man coverage-heavy scheme where he's going to have to chase this one guy around the field all day, I don't think Julian Love is a scheme fit there. So I don't think he's got to go back to cornerback on this team. I don't think he can. He just won't fit there. But I do think they should try to put him in at strong safety again and see if he can continue to build off of what he did last season because he showed a lot of really solid strong safety traits in his rookie season.
Right. It really comes down to when McKinney makes his way back, he's going to take that free safety spot. There's no doubt about it. Now, I'm not against having Love play specifically at strong safety and kind of flip-flopping with Deebo Peppers and seeing what happens there. Deebo Peppers is just such a superior athlete. We saw it last week, even with a bum ankle. He made a crazy ran across the field, made a crazy tackle to stop a Dallas offensive guy from getting a first down, and he was mad when they took him off the field. He was like, "You got to keep me in right now." And I think that Deebo Peppers is capable of being a very good player. We just haven't seen him take that step up to you're a staple on this defense. He's just kind of serviceable right now, but I think he has the ability to be better. But I don't mind trying Julian Love in the meantime while, Peppers is working his way back in, just kind of maybe splitting reps 50-50, see what happens. Because it seems like Adrian Colbert, who has experience with Miami last year in Patrick Graham's scheme, is now kind of filling in for Love at free safety. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. But I do like what they've done with him. I don't think it was a mistake to move him from cornerback. But again, he's capable of doing it. I just don't understand why they didn't give him a chance to hold down the slot at all. Against CeeDee Lamb, or I guess they have Darnay Holmes. They want to develop him there, but I guess they don't see Julian Love as a cornerback in the NFL. They see him as more of a safety. So we'll see how they progress there. But I don't think there's going to be much changes. On to our final question by Eon Internet Marketing. Don't know the actual name of this fellow, but how many games will the coaching staff Giants organization allow Jones to lose prior to benching him? We fans are wondering. This is a pretty hot take, if you ask me. They're not benching Daniel Jones, in my opinion. They're not benching him because the factors around him are so poor, and do you really want to see Colt McCoy in there? Is that really what you want? You want to see Colt McCoy stealing reps from Daniel Jones when he really needs the time to learn this system? I'll give you an example. Ron Rivera said this week, I really like Daniel Jones, but he needs time in that scheme. He's still learning the system. He didn't have the preseason. He barely had any sort of preseason time to learn the system except for virtually. They jumped right into a full regular season with a new scheme. You really couldn't expect him to know the entire thing yet, could you? So now we're sitting here and we're like, Daniel Jones this, Daniel Jones that. And I'm like, Jason Garrett's scheme is it's going to take a while for him to understand. But when you have the offensive line playing against you and the wide receivers playing against you, and then you don't know how to use Evan Ingram, and your running game is poor, both your tackles are playing terribly. Cam Fleming's our best tackle through 5 weeks, and he's playing bad. It's when your best offensive lineman is also one of your weakest links, you're in trouble. This is one of the worst offensive line groups through 5 weeks we've seen in Giants probably the last 10 years or so. So when you think about that, how can you sit here, and then you have Sterling Shepard out too, how do you sit here and really blame all of it on Jones? I wrote an article yesterday about this specifically, and I'd probably say about 20% of it lands on Jones, the other 80% of it lands on everybody else. The reason I say 20% is because you can't disregard the turnovers and the bad decisions and the bad throws and the staring down your receivers. Those are inexcusable. You have to be better than that, and I think there's still the potential there for him to be great. I just don't think it's going to happen anytime soon unless they get him some better pieces to work with.
I'll say I agree. He does need better players around him. But that's not why I think you don't bench him. I think you don't bench him just because you might have a future in Daniel Jones. You do not have a future in Colt McCoy. And you don't need to put Colt McCoy on the field to find out whether or not you have a future in Colt McCoy. You should just know you don't have a future in Colt McCoy. So keep Daniel Jones on the field, let him make his mistakes, and let him continue to grow. And you know what? If he continues to make mistakes and he continues to play poorly and we continue to lose, start talking about Trevor Lawrence. And then, say it's week 12 and you're in the race for Trevor Lawrence and you need to see if you can get there, maybe you consider benching Daniel Jones at that point and putting Colt McCoy in. And then you know what? That's a tanking move, and Giants fans are probably going to be upset about that. I would be upset about that. I don't think you should ever tank, but if it's justifiable, if Daniel Jones is playing that bad, he does have a 2-to-8 touchdown to interception ratio, which is pretty horrific. But if he continues to play like that and you want to make the move to get Trevor Lawrence, then maybe towards the end of the year, once you think it's feasible to get Trevor Lawrence, you make the move and you bench Daniel Jones. But I just think you have a future in Jones. You don't have a future in McCoy, so you should keep Jones on the field and let him progress and develop and see where that goes. Because if he could prove himself as a starting quarterback, you don't have to worry about anything else. You just worry about developing him and then building around him. But for now, I think he's got a stronger grip on the starting position, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I think he's going to be the starter all the way through the end of the season, and probably starting next season if he as long as he just starts to play a little bit better, and he doesn't completely bottom out by the end of the year.
They have a great opportunity this week to show what they're made of, and build on the creativity we saw in the first drive against Dallas. We need to see more of that. See more pre-snap motions, see more better running game, and getting down Jones, and they even did some designed rollouts, which was interesting. So I want to see more of that. Darius Slayton went off last week. I think he's going to have another great week. Sterling Shepard actually was on the field running around a little bit on Thursday, so that's also nice to see. We'll keep you guys updated with that, of course, on the website via our written articles and via Twitter. We're doing this all the time, just creating content for you guys, keep you guys engaged and having fun with the team, even though we might kind of suck right now. But I promise you better days are ahead, and we will be there to usher you through the bad ones to get to the good ones. Now, I appreciate everyone for supporting us throughout this time, and we are going to continue to produce awesome content. So thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you guys on Sunday for the pregame.